Hello, Ms. Adai. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Here are the topics I'll be covering for today. So first, I'll summarize the plot of my show. So my show has enlisted and recruited around 500 females and males to breed newborn infants. Rosie is our primary character and also a newborn who was picked for her attractiveness. The remainder of the infants were used as extras for the show. The government in Rosia's society has established a hardcore ranking system based on how well residents adhere to societal norms, which were inspired by the 1950s lifestyle. So families are essentially expected to create their own nuclear family and fulfill their obligations within it. High-ranking families are given advantages, whereas low-ranking families are treated poorly. Rosie is currently residing in Evermore with her family of actors, and Evermore is the name of the town that she lives in. Rosie eventually struggles to keep up with the strict norms and expectations of her society, and suspects that there may be some deception going on. Now I'll go over her identity. So Rosie's ethnicity is Canadian-born Korean. Her immigrant parents instilled in her the ability to adapt both Canadian and traditional Korean beliefs. Her family is subjected to some discrimination as a result of their ethnicity, resulting in a slightly lower government ranking. This also illustrates race conflict and also ethnocentric views of immigrant families. Now I'll move on to Rosie's age. So Rosie is currently 17 and undergoing an identity crisis because of her body dysmorphia. She struggles with the looking glass self-concept because she bases her self-worth on what she thinks how others perceive her. Furthermore, she encounters a lot of societal pressure to conform to societal expectations at her age. Third is gender. So Rosie is biologically female and also identifies and expresses as one as well. The gender binary system in Rosie's society is deeply entrenched. So despite her desire to cross gender lines, she has been unable to do so due to her fear of discrimination. Now let's move on to religion. So in our show, the community takes over the place of religion in terms of setting shared values among all the members of the community. The community also holds ethnocentric views on other communities and religions and essentially labels itself as the utopia of all communities. Fifth is physical characteristics. So Rosie is physically attractive and she meets most beauty standards and earns privileges with her beauty. And listed here are some physical characteristics that she has. Last is social class. So Rosie lives a wealthy and lavish lifestyle, and as a result, she has a fixed role allocation and peer network due to the social hierarchy. Rosie also loses her individuality as a result of these societal pressures for her to pursue this certain lifestyle. Now let's move on to the core beliefs. So firstly, Rosie believes that beauty earns privilege for women and that it is the most important quality a woman should carry. Listed second is the need to exceedingly conform to the regulations and role that society has assigned her. In Rosie's case, it would be to become a mother and a wife. Listed last is allegiance and worship to her community and government. Now let's move on to the school, which is the first social institution listed. So Rosie attends an all-girls private school in Evermore, and the school's primary method of reinforcing core beliefs is through role allocation. The school curriculum, for example, has been altered to include only feminine courses like art, cooking, and parenting skills. This is utilized to direct their gender roles and also to prepare them to be family nurturers. The role allocation also recognizes the significance of feminine beauty, as the school curriculum includes many strategies for maintaining one's attractiveness, and it essentially reinforces the idea that women must be attractive in order to keep their husbands. Lastly, the school instills the idea of worshiping the community and government by broadcasting propaganda on the morning announcements every day. They also do employ teachings that instill fear for people that disobey. So overall, the manifest function of school is used to educate and train young women to be family nurturers. The latent function, on the other hand, is to brainwash them into conforming to tight expectations and to prevent them from exercising control over their own lives. Another latent function is how suffocating the curriculum is and how it causes the students to feel self-conscious about themselves. Now, listed second is government, which is the second social institution listed. So to begin with, the government employs segregation to divide the beautiful and wealthy from the poor and ugly. The beautiful and wealthy are ranked highest and also enjoy the most government perks, including better living conditions. And high and low-ranking families are forced to live in like overcrowded and filthy conditions. So the discrimination against the poor and ugly also emphasizes the significance of both appearance and social position in Rosie society. The government also employs surveillance to force residents to conform to its norms. And also to reinforce core beliefs, it employs like red tape and an immoral legislation. For example, there are laws made to prevent women from the workforce, and also the government doesn't criminalize or address marital abuse or sexual harassment, thereby forcing women to become like the slaves and scapegoats of society. Lastly, the government reinforces citizens to obey them by employing violence and torture against those who disobey. So the government's manifest function is to keep Evermore's society running smoothly and to safeguard its residents from outsiders. The latent function, on the other hand, is how the government's laws and procedures hurt the residents and indoctrinate them to live like functional cogs in a machine. Getting rid of individuality and keeping authoritarian control over the town are also two other latent functions. So now let's move on to religion, which is the third social institution listed. So the community of Evermore essentially serves as the religion in our show. The manifest function of the community is to bring people together and reinforce common beliefs relating to like beauty, government obligation, and norms. Its main goal is to foster a sense of collective conscience. And the latent function, on the other hand, is to use psychological manipulation and pressure tactics to dominate its members. So citizens who do not follow the community's rules, for example, are harshly punished and also expelled from Evermore. Also, rather than promoting like fellowship, the community encourages members to like spy on each other and report each other. So the community is essentially like the religion, and the government is like the god. The community carries out the will of the government and also imposes government rules on its members. Next is family, which is the first agent of socialization listed. So Rosie's family as a primary agent has a significant influence on her essential views. So from an early age, Rosie's family has been used to emphasize particularistic values, such as Rosie's beauty, whether it was through managing Rosie's diet or exercise, or teaching her the concept of beauty through material items like Barbies. This is also an important step in Rosie's primary socialization. Throughout Rosie's youth, her parents also established social conventions and practices so she could mimic her mother, who is modeled after a 1950s housewife. Rosie's raw identity causes her to be influenced by her family's strict conventions, putting her under pressure to fulfill her responsibility and also role in her nuclear family. Furthermore, her family is entirely loyal to the community and to the government, to the point where they're kind of blinded and indoctrinated. So Rosie has been conditioned by her family to admire the government as well. The second agent of socialization is the media, which has a big scope of influence on Rosie's core beliefs. To begin with, many sources of influence are employed. So TV commercials, social media, and magazines, for example, are all used to portray beauty as a source of privilege, in the hopes that Rosie will believe it as well. Additionally, these resources assist Rosie in emulating unrealistic beauty goals. The nuclear family, on the other hand, is also portrayed in the media as like the ideal and perfect life. Every morning, for example, news broadcasts air like PSAs, reminding Rosie of her responsibility and the repercussions if she doesn't fulfill them. Finally, the media is like a tool utilized by like the government to disseminate propaganda and to maintain control over individuals, including Rosie. The last agent of socialization is peers. So due to the uniform structure of her society, all her peers share the exact same values in life as Rosie. They are also unanimous in conforming to their restricted life, so Rosie feels pressure to conform as well. This demonstrates direct influence. Group-based identity also has a strong influence on Rosie's conformity. She like conforms to avoid being singled out and criticized by her peers. So now let's move on to the sociological perspective. So Rosie has been living in Evermore ever since she was born. However, now that she's becoming an adult, she begins suspecting and she believes that she is being deceived. So she takes a foreign lens and perspective of her society, and she begins to notice that her society may be not as harmonious and perfect as promoted. And she notices a lot of problems. So she starts listing some of these particular observations in like a notebook. These are the particular things she noticed from her observation. So firstly, despite the community's efforts to portray itself as compassionate, Rosie believes that the community's restrictions and like sanctions are very oppressive. And as a result, she begins to doubt the community's genuine intentions. Secondly, Rosie notices that the community refuses to answer Rosie's questions about the outside world. Before, she thought the community was just like protecting her, but now she thinks it's like to manipulate her to like not leave evermore. Thirdly, Rosie notices that there is something odd about the concept of her community. For example, she notices that her community promotes members to monitor and backstab each other rather than to cooperate. So as a result, she begins to notice how toxic and totalistic her community is and begins to reconsider her life in Evermore. Now let's move on to the sociological theories. So firstly, the concept of our show demonstrates functionalism. The society in our show functions to serve like the governing power, and all social institutions typically work together to reinforce the importance of obeying the governing power, whether it is through like school teachings, community, or family values. Society functions to keep like everything in order, and all citizens are like supposed to fulfill their role in their nuclear family, or else society will essentially crumble. Conflict theory and discrimination are also evident in our show. For instance, there is a social ranking in place that contributes to the wide gap between the rich and the poor. Low ranking families face like horrible conditions and they struggle for wealth, power, and resources. And this mainly results from like the segregation of the privileged and underprivileged in our show. Now I'd like to highlight how Rosie's community is a total institution. So in brief, residents are forced to follow like strict norms and are closed off from the outside world. They have no control over their lives and they are also forced to live the same life as everyone else. Now, lastly are the advertisements that we have obtained for our show. So firstly, our show has obtained a lot of advertisement endorsements related to beauty, since it is a major theme in our show and one of our core beliefs. Advertisements such as plastic surgery, makeup, and diet pills are advertised, and Rosie helps us obtain a lot of these endorsements because of her notable physical appearance. Secondly, we also offer advertisements targeted at stereotypical nuclear families. Listed here are some products that we advertise, and the products that we use for Rosie's family are typically the ones that we advertise. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.